Welcome to our program, Musical Moments with Tanya. Today's topic is new and old sounds of the violin. We have a guest, Clayton Mathews, a violinist and a composer and educator. I have a question for you.
Sure.
How did you become a musician, and how come you picked violin?
It's one of my earlier memories of music is my mother asking me if I wanted to go see musicians. And in my brain of a 6-year-old kid, I heard magicians. And she takes me, I get all excited, and she takes me to the Symphony Hall, and as we walk in, I immediately was disappointed by the lack of rabbits being pulled out of hats and tricks and all the fanfare of magic. But then something else happened where you started hearing all the strings tuning up and all the musicians playing their parts to themselves. And there was a very magical quality about all that, and I immediately fell in love with music. And then from that day, I knew I either wanted to play the flute or the violin. And my mother and my grandmother and I went to the music store, and we picked out the flute, and I played that a little bit, and it just didn't feel right. I just didn't like it in my hands. And then the store clerk let me try out the violin, and I put it underneath my chin, and I just knew right away that's what I wanted.
Clayton, being a child and picked the violin kind of spontaneously, just having good feel of it, you didn't know that it's the most difficult instrument to learn how to play.
No,
Have you ever regretted it?
No, not for 1 minute. It's a very difficult instrument, yes. But on the flip side of that, the violin, unlike any other instrument, is the closest to that of the human voice. And so it can be very profound in its delivery. And on its own, it can stand and invoke so much emotion. And as Einstein once said, throughout my life, the most joy I've had is when I have my violin. And that's true with me as well. I believe that the difficulties of playing the violin are well rewarded simply by the music itself that resonates from the violin.
It's so nice to know.
Yeah.
A huge stereotype of the violin is that it's mostly an orchestral instrument. Is this true today?
I'd have to disagree with that. There's so many different avenues now available to the violin, and just the music in general. It's been reshaping so much in the last 50 years that orchestra is not really the only option for violinists anymore. You have great musicians like Stephen Grappelli, where in the 30s and 40s started his Hot Club band with Django Reinhardt. And you have acoustic music like this swing gypsy jazz that has become very, very popular, and you have gypsy jazz festivals all over the world now for that. There's also other virtuosos like Mark O'Connor, where he has taken the American roots fiddle music to a whole nother level of musicianship that originated somewhere with Bill Monroe and his bluegrass band and other old-time music.
Would you have some examples of it for our audience?
Sure. I'll play you a tune that's popular with Stephen Grappelli.
Great.
So the first tune I will demonstrate is an old-time fiddle tune called Cumberland Gap.
Clayton, being by background, very, very traditional musician, I wonder, all those different styles, are they completely different or they have some similarities in playing violin?
Yeah, they do have a lot of similarities. Stylistically, with music, you'll have certain elements of music that will transcend from style to style. One of those things is definitely intonation. Intonation with the violin is very difficult, and violinists have to give a lot of thought to. Whereas someone like a pianist or a guitarist with fixed pitch, you don't have to think as much about it, or virtually at all. And then there's something else with tone. With the best musicians, within one note, you can tell who it is, and that is all from tone. And the purity of the violin and the richness in trying to convey this voice of the instrument is all comes down to the richness of its sound and its tone.
Does it come from the personality, or it has to do with a certain violin maker?
Both the violin maker and the musician itself. The musician, the note and the quality of note will ultimately come down from the musician, of course. And then there's articulation. There's articulations that will be conveyed from style to style, but how they use them in each of those styles will be different. But the same articulations will apply from style to style. And you'll see them with the best musicians, and how they use them. Regardless of what they're playing, the articulations are there.
Clayton, as a musician, I have very, very traditional background, and those styles that you mentioned, they're really, really new to me. And I wonder, are they very, very different, or there are some similarities that bridge them together?
There are several similarities that bridge these styles together. One thing with the violin is definitely intonation. Intonation throughout music is one of the things that is imperative, but on the violin it's very difficult because it's not a fixed pitched instrument, and so violinists have to give great thought and a lot of time and effort to make sure that intonation is there. Another thing is tone. With the greatest musicians, you hear one note and you know who it is, and that's all a factor of tone, and the richness of sound and to try and convey the voice of the violin all comes down to sound production and tone quality. And
what about if different musicians, they have violins of a different violin maker?
That will all, I mean, from violin to violin, I will still sound the same. The violin might change a little bit from, like, you know, how low the actual resonance of the low G string is versus how high and tinny or low the actual sound is of the high E string. But the way my finger will be on the fingerboard and my bow will strike a note will be the same from instrument to instrument. So
individual.
Yeah, it's all the individual, yes. And then with articulation, that's another thing that bridges these genres together. Articulation, it's a finite amount of things, and so with genre to genre, you'll have the same sort of articulations, but with each genre, they might use them in a different way. So that's one thing where they exist throughout the different genres, but they are used in several different ways.
And you have few examples of
Sure, I can play you a few examples to show this.
That's wonderful.
Sure, let's do that. This next tune is an old gypsy tune, a gypsy jazz tune, titled Three Little Words. excerpt I will play is an excerpt of the E major Bach Partita number 5, Minuet 2.
Clayton, I've heard you playing music of different styles. Does it bother you to travel from one to another genre?
No, you just have to be aware of how to cater to each genre. And with each genre, I mentioned earlier that they might be similar articulations, but they're used in different ways. Say in classical music where musical passages will be much larger than some other genre of music, you have to know how to cater to that, and you have to understand that classical versus something like fiddle music where there is not an emphasis on groove and so much rhythm, you have to use it in different ways. And in fiddle music, there's far less vibrato for each individual note, and the main focus is maintaining the groove in the pocket of the tune. And if you use too much vibrato or accent one note too much, you have a tendency to sort of get stuck in the mud and kind of get rut, and this can kind of hold you back. So switching from genre to genre, you just have to have an understanding of what you need to cater to.
So once the switch works in your mind, your muscle memory delivers?
Yeah, your muscle memory will deliver, yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Do you compose music and perform it just as well?
I do. I primarily compose acoustic-based music, say of like acoustic guitars and banjo and cello and violin, as opposed to like electrified music of like electric guitar and stuff like that. And I like to borrow from several different genres, whether it be fiddle music or classical music, and kind of use some of the things that you'll find in each genre and put them together and see how well I can make them into a solid composition, yeah.
So you follow the tradition and do it in the contemporary
and tweak it
way.
in a different way, yeah. What I'll play for you now is a composition that I wrote for cello and violin, a duet, and it's with a wonderful musician and cellist, Sharon. Hello, and now welcome my friend Sharon on cello, and we're going to be playing a duet I wrote called Tipsy Turvy for violin and cello. One, two,
Clayton, we would know where to go to listen to the best classical music on the violin or orchestra. But among all those new genres of violin music, are there nice places in Boston where you can get acquainted with it, enjoy different genres?
Sure. There's great clubs around the city, say like 939, where lots of bands come through that are on tour around the United States. That's a great club, and that's owned and operated by Berklee College of Music. And then there's another great place in Cambridge called the Cantab Lounge, where phenomenal bluegrass musicians will play, and that's every Tuesday night. And then another spot for great acoustic music is an historic place where some of the most phenomenal bands have played, called Club Passim. And that's primarily all acoustic music, say songwriters and different genres of folk music and stuff like that, and it's a phenomenal place.
Thank you, Clayton. I wish we had more time because there's so much information that I've learned today from you. Come again.
Of course,
Thank you so much for your playing, for your introduction to different genres
You're welcome.
of new violin.
Of course. My pleasure.
Thank you again.